Stay alone, not because you are broken, not because you are unwanted, but because the world is too loud to teach you who you truly are. Stoicism does not glorify loneliness as suffering. It honors solitude as training, as a silent battlefield where the mind learns discipline and the soul regains authority over itself. When you remove yourself from noise, from opinions, from constant validation, something uncomfortable begins to happen. You start hearing your own thoughts clearly. Most people avoid being alone because solitude exposes weakness, fear, and unresolved wounds. But the Stoic does the opposite. He enters solitude deliberately, knowing that self-mastery is impossible without facing the self. In that silence, you are no longer performing for others, no longer reacting, no longer distracted. You begin to observe your impulses instead of obeying them, your emotions instead of drowning in them. This is where strength is forged, not in crowds, not in approval, but in the quiet discipline of standing alone with your mind and refusing to be ruled by it. Most people fear being alone not because solitude is painful, but because it removes their distractions. And without distractions, they are forced to confront who they really are. Stoicism teaches that fear is not born from isolation, but from dependency, the need for constant attention, entertainment, and emotional reassurance. When you are surrounded by others, it is easy to borrow confidence, to borrow identity, to borrow purpose. But when you are alone, there is nothing to hide behind. Every insecurity becomes louder. Every weakness becomes visible. And that is exactly why solitude is powerful. The Stoic understands that growth begins where comfort ends. By choosing to be alone, you take responsibility for your thoughts, your emotions, and your reactions. You stop blaming the world and start mastering yourself. Solitude is not emptiness. It is clarity. It strips away illusions and reveals whether your strength is real or borrowed. For the Stoic, solitude is not an escape from life, but preparation for it. Marcus Aurelius wrote that a man must retreat into himself daily, not to avoid responsibility, but to strengthen his mind against chaos. When you stay alone, you are training yourself to remain stable without external support. You learn to sit with discomfort without reacting, to experience emotions without being controlled by them. This is the same discipline that allows a Stoic to remain calm during loss, insult, or failure. Solitude removes emotional crutches and forces you to build internal structure. You stop seeking motivation from others and begin developing discipline within yourself. Over time, you realize something dangerous. You no longer need the world to feel complete. And when you no longer need, you cannot be controlled. Emotional dependency is the invisible chain that keeps most people weak, and solitude is the blade that cuts it. Stoicism teaches that suffering increases when we attach our inner peace to external things, people, praise, relationships, or attention. When you choose to stay alone, those attachments begin to dissolve. You realize how much of your happiness depended on others behaving a certain way, speaking a certain way, validating your existence. Alone, there is no applause, no reassurance, no distraction, only reality. And in that reality, you either collapse or adapt. The Stoic adapts. He learns to generate calm from within, confidence from discipline, and worth from self-respect. This is when emotional independence is born. You stop chasing connection out of fear and start choosing it from strength. Stoicism does not reject relationships, but it demands that you master yourself before entering them. When you connect with others without self-mastery, you bring need, fear, and insecurity into the bond. But when you stay alone long enough to understand yourself, to control your emotions, to stand firm in silence, you become someone who adds value instead of seeking it. Solitude teaches you patience, clarity, and self-respect. It ensures that when you finally choose connection, it is not from loneliness but from choice. The Stoic knows that a man who cannot be alone will never be strong in company. Master yourself first, and the world will no longer have power over you. Silence is not emptiness. It is control. Stoicism teaches that every unnecessary word weakens authority, and every emotional reaction gives power away. When you stay alone, You begin to understand silence not as absence, but as presence, the presence of awareness, restraint, and intention. In solitude, you stop reacting instantly. You pause. You observe. You choose. This is why silence unsettles others. They cannot read you, cannot predict you, cannot manipulate you. The Stoic does not argue to prove strength. He remains silent to preserve it. Over time, silence becomes armor. Insults lose their effect. Provocations lose their grip. You realize that the strongest response is often no response at all. And in that quiet restraint, your mind becomes sharp and unshakable. Emotions are not enemies in Stoicism. Lack of control is. When you are constantly surrounded by people, emotions spread like fire, anger, fear, excitement, and insecurity move from one mind to another. Solitude cuts this chain. Alone, you are forced to experience emotions without external influence, without validation, without escape. This is where mastery begins. You feel anger rise, but you do not act. You feel sadness, but you do not drown. You observe emotions as temporary states, not commands. The Stoic understands that emotions pass whether you obey them or not. And in solitude, you learn patience, the discipline of letting feelings exist without letting them rule. Over time, emotional storms lose their intensity, and calm becomes your natural state. Pain feels heavier when you face it alone, but Stoicism teaches that pain is also clearer in solitude. Without distractions, pain reveals lessons where you are weak, where you are attached, where you resist reality. The Stoic does not ask why pain exists. He asks what it demands. Solitude removes sympathy and replaces it with understanding. You stop seeking comfort and start seeking strength. Pain becomes instruction, not injustice. Each uncomfortable moment trains endurance, humility, and perspective. Alone, you learn that suffering does not destroy you. Resistance to suffering does. When pain is accepted, it loses its power, and what remains is resilience. Discipline is impossible without solitude because discipline requires obedience to self, not to others. When no one is watching, when no one is praising, when no one is reminding you, your true character is revealed. Stoicism demands action without applause. In solitude, routines are tested, promises are challenged, and excuses are exposed. You either follow through or you don't, and there is no one to blame. This is where real power is built. Each disciplined act strengthens self-trust. Each completed task becomes evidence that you can rely on yourself. Over time, discipline replaces motivation, and consistency replaces emotion. You become stable, reliable, and dangerous in your self-control. Mental invincibility is not loud, aggressive, or arrogant. It is quiet certainty. Stoicism teaches that when you remove dependence on external approval, your mind becomes untouchable. Solitude accelerates this process by forcing you to stand on your own values, your own principles, your own discipline. Criticism loses its sting because you no longer seek validation. Praise loses its grip because you no longer depend on it. You are guided by reason, not reaction. This is the final transformation of solitude, freedom. When nothing outside you controls your emotions, you move through the world calm, focused, and unbreakable. You are no longer surviving, you are governing yourself. Detachment is not coldness. It is clarity. Stoicism teaches that attachment is the root of unnecessary suffering, because we attempt to control what was never ours to command. People, outcomes, time, and fate. Solitude sharpens this lesson by removing emotional noise and revealing how often your peace depended on things outside your control. Alone, you begin to understand that detachment does not mean you care less. It means you care wisely. You give effort without obsession, love without possession, and commitment without fear. The Stoic learns to act fully while remaining internally free. This is the highest form of strength, involvement without dependence. When you master detachment, nothing can be taken from you, because nothing owns you. Purpose is rarely discovered in noise. It reveals itself in silence. Stoicism teaches that a meaningful life is built on alignment between action and principle, not on applause or approval. When you stay alone long enough, ambition becomes refined. You stop chasing everything and begin choosing one direction. Solitude removes false desires and exposes what truly matters. You begin to ask deeper questions. Not what feels good, but what is right. Not what is easy, but what is necessary. The Stoic understands that purpose is not excitement, it is responsibility, accepted willingly. In silence, clarity replaces confusion, and discipline replaces doubt. This is how a life gains direction. Stoicism does not ask you to abandon the world forever. It prepares you to re-enter it with control. After solitude has strengthened your mind, disciplined your emotions, and clarified your values, you return not as a seeker but as a pillar. Noise no longer pulls you. Drama no longer distracts you. You move with intention. You speak less but mean more. Others feel your presence before you say a word. Because stability is rare and power is silent, the Stoic returns to society not to dominate, but to contribute without losing himself. This is the reward of self-mastery. Engagement without exhaustion, leadership without ego, strength without aggression. The Stoic life is governed by a simple code. Control what you can, accept what you cannot, and act with virtue in all conditions. Solitude teaches this code not as theory but as lived experience. You learn where your control ends and where acceptance begins. You stop wasting energy on resentment, regret, and resistance. Every action becomes deliberate. Every reaction becomes optional. This code transforms chaos into order and suffering into meaning. The Stoic does not demand life to be easy. He demands himself to be strong, disciplined, and honorable. This is not a philosophy for comfort. It is a system for endurance. Stay alone until you master yourself, not because the world rejects you, but because you refuse to live as a slave to emotion, opinion, or fear. Solitude is not the destination. It is the forge. It shapes your mind, disciplines your impulses, and teaches you self-respect. When you finally choose connection, purpose, and responsibility, you do so from strength, not desperation. This is the Stoic path, quiet, demanding, and transformative. Those who walk it do not seek attention. They command respect through calm, consistency, and character. Master yourself first, and nothing outside you will ever own you again.